A lot more chaos this weekend for federal workers. Thanks to this "tell me what you did last week" email, thousands of people still fear for the future of their employment. What's going on?
What is going on, Stephanie? We don't really know. It seems that there's the Elon Musk, Donald Trump axis of the federal government. Then there's the entire infrastructure of the actual federal government, which has a very different response. And first you saw a few agencies kind of hesitantly telling their workers over the weekend, no, you don't need to answer. Some were saying you do need to answer. Now by today, there seems to be a more consistent, no, you're not actually going to be forced to resign if you don't answer this weird email from the world's richest man over the weekend. It's an amazing sign of where we are, but let's not forget that Musk has already essentially unilaterally fired thousands and thousands of workers already. We haven't got a full inventory yet, even of all the people he's already gotten rid of. Never mind the ones who are worrying tonight that if they don't send an email by the deadline, somehow their job is going to disappear. It's all unexplained. And I have to say, when I hear about how transparent and open the Trump White House is, that's just because the president talks a lot doesn't mean it's transparent. I have a lot of questions. I'm sure you have a lot of questions about what exactly this is and how it makes any sense whatsoever.
Susan, that is the most important point. They say they're so transparent. The president makes a lot of noise and says a lot of things, but we have endless questions. Dave, here's mine. Is this going to end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy where Elon Musk claims that the federal government gets nothing done? How are people working in the government actually getting anything done? Like, what does it look like the day in and day out with all this nonsense going on?
That was a theme at some of the town hall meetings last week, and there weren't that many. The Republicans who held them were generally in safe seats. But something I noticed listening to them is how many people came out who had some role in the federal workforce or knew somebody who did, and were explaining just the stress of having to work under these conditions, what would be lost if their job was lost. Social Security Administration workers, IRS workers talking to Congressman Brazieri today and say, you do realize that the federal government loses money if we can't actually enforce the tax code, if we can't collect on people, if we're late in turning everything around. And yes, you've pinpointed something. There is an idea in conservatism that if the government is incompetent, if the costs are transparent, but everything is very slow moving and not speedy like the private sector, people are going to be down on the government. The risk might be that they already are, that people already have that dim view of the government, but under Donald Trump, it might get markedly worse, and they would associate weaker performance with Elon Musk, with Doge. Democrats are pretty coherently arguing that is going to happen now, that the government's being slashed so randomly and so dramatically that what sounds good on paper is going to, even if you want these costs to go down, is going to lead to worse services that are more expensive than just having government run effectively.
David Drucker, there are reports that this email situation is setting off a power struggle between Elon Musk and some very senior Trump loyalists. But clearly, Donald Trump is on board with Elon Musk.
I mean, apparently, to Susan's point, this hasn't been a very transparent process. And as I reported for the Dispatch last month, the Department of Government Efficiency is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And so if the administration does not want to answer questions, it's really difficult to find out what they're doing. What's the goal? What's the process, right? These aren't political questions we're asking here. This isn't about whether or not their decision to cut this program or fire that employee is a good or bad decision. This is just about, will you explain the process? I actually think that the administration would do itself some good politically if they were explaining the process. Here's how we attacked this agency or this program. Here's why we made cuts here. Here's how it's going to work better for you. They're not doing that. So on the one hand, lots of voters, especially voters that work in the private sector, are subject to all sorts of what seem like chaotic decisions from the C-suite all the time. They won't necessarily have a lot of sympathy or concerns about federal workers, but they will be upset if the government doesn't work better after this process. And I think that, what the administration hasn't been able to do. They've explained that we're being aggressive here and trying to trim, what they say is a lot of fat, but they're not explaining what that fat is and then therefore how it's going to improve government services. And on the other end of this, that's where they run the risk of a political backlash.
Okay, David, you've just laid this out so well, because the idea of DOGE has a lot of support. So is there a way for Republicans to actually take control of this? Because how you just presented it, that would actually get a lot of support from people.
Yeah, well, listen, Republicans on Capitol Hill could raise their voices and raise the alarm, and they could push back against Donald Trump and Elon Musk, but there's not going to be a lot of political will to do so, because within the Republican base, not only is Trump very popular, but Elon Musk has become almost this sort of cultural phenomenon that they like just about as much as they like Trump. And, as I've been discussing with people, even if the president's numbers dip, somewhat significantly, which is, of course, very possible, the idea that they're going to dip that much in Republican circles, that Republicans are going to sour on Elon Musk, given how he runs X, formerly Twitter, given the money that he's contributed to Republican causes over the last year, it's just not very realistic, at least prior to the midterm elections. And so for members of Congress or people running for office looking ahead to Republican primaries next year, what they're going to say is, these voters broadly may be unhappy, but I've got to win a Republican primary. I need Trump's endorsement. I definitely don't want Elon Musk banging all over me on X. I can't afford to speak up, and they're going to be pragmatic about it from a political standpoint.
So sort of what I hear you saying is they like Elon Musk like they like Donald Trump. They're afraid of him. Susan,
Yes.
I want to talk about Dan Bongino, right? For our audience, if they don't know him, far right-wing podcaster, former Fox News host, and, of course, newly named #2 at the FBI. I just want to read a few of the things he's posted online previously to familiarize our audience with him. Here's a few. Quote, "The FBI is no longer a law enforcement entity. It's an Oppo research firm for Democrats with an armed political enforcement branch." He called for the FBI, as it's currently constituted, to be disbanded. And when talking about the Bureau, he said, "I don't trust these people at all." How's this going to work, Susan?
Well, look, this is supposed to be an apolitical job. It's one that historically has gone to a career official. Apparently, Kash Patel, now confirmed as the FBI director, had told his employees that he was planning to have a career person in this role. Instead, they've taken the exact opposite approach with the most hyper-partisan, hyper-political alternative possible in this crucial role, who is, essentially in charge of the day-to-day running of the FBI. I think it suggests, again, this is on the maximalist version of Donald Trump. This is a message as loud and clear as possible. And I'm just wondering at what point Trump's critics are finally going to get the message. They mean not only to take power, but now to wield it. And, that's what I'm bracing for is, once we get over these shock appointments, how far are they willing to take the extraordinary powers that are now in their possession? We don't know the answer to that part yet.
All right, before I let the three of you go, Dave Weigel, I've got to ask you about CPAC. You had the distinct privilege of covering it last week. You wrote about the right wing wanting to take their Trump movement global. Tell us what you learned, because lots of us are looking at the election that took place in Germany over the weekend.
Yes, and that was cheered when it came up. The mention of J.D. Vance's speech in Munich was cheered when it came up. He got a standing ovation without having to give the speech again. And even keying to what Susan was just talking about, leaders of far-right parties around the world, if their leader was in legal trouble, like Brazilians, like Bolsonaro, they were comparing that to the trouble Donald Trump got in between 2021 and winning the presidency again. A very coherent story that, one, what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing is going to be successful, and two, that it could be explored around the world when it was. And the risk for Republicans, other people have been here before in the first couple months after winning an election, the risk is that they're listening to that amen choir, they're in this epistemic bubble, and they're doing very ideologically motivated things that are not necessarily top of mind for the voters who made up the decisive margin. They were talking at CPAC about these Latino voters, black men, et cetera, who had voted for Trump as if they are locked in, that the Democrats cannot possibly win them back. At the moment, Democrats don't look like they're winning them back, but that is often where a party runs into trouble, when they assume that everyone who came along is down for the mission of, for example, putting Don Bongino in number 2 at the FBI. TBD if that's actually what those swing voters wanted.